Guys, we've got a bunch of crazy stories for you today, August 6th. We're going to be talking about Texas state legislators bailing on, well, the state of Texas. Plus, we're going to be talking about the Army gutting its aviation units and stopping a storied tradition in basic training. And of course, the rise of the American mercenary, or rather the return of the American mercenary. Why are Americans showing up in global conflicts all over the world? And finally, we're going to talk about our favorite negotiator, Steve Witkoff, famous for literally not being able to negotiate his way out of a paper bag, is somehow back in the good graces trying to broker another peace deal. Now, you may have noticed that in these episodes, what we have done is broken them up into individual videos. This way, if there's a topic you already have covered, aren't interested in, you can just skip it. But make sure you subscribe to the channel, turn on that little notification bell. That's going to make a big difference, right? So let's get into it. Okay. So Texas Democrats. Now, this has been a story that has, well, been breaking and for a long time, but notably that in the state of Texas, Donald Trump actually went to the governor of Texas and said, listen, I want you as a majority Republican state to carve up your congressional districts, mid-cycle, which is not really supposed to happen. It's only supposed to happen every 10 years after the census. But he goes, I want you to carve them up, and I want you to gerrymander them to a level never before seen in the United States. I want you to carve them up so that the Democrats, you send 5 fewer Democrats to the House this year, right? Make your districts even more Byzantine, even more non-competitive, right? Now, in response to this, the Texas Democrats, this is in the state legislature, packed up and moved to Illinois. What this has done is prevented the legislature from achieving quorum. This is the idea that enough legislatures are actually, legislating to make law happen. And this is a pretty brazen move, right? Because they are incurring fines. Now, Greg Abbott the governor of Texas, he's been hemming and hawing up a storm saying, well, we're going to arrest these guys, or this is a criminal matter. It's not a criminal matter. It's a civil matter. They pay a $500 fine, which a Democrat donor has already pledged. Now, you may think, Paul, this doesn't seem very fair. This doesn't seem very legislatively okay. But what I want to point out is 2 things. The first is that when you have the context, and I'm going to give you guys the numbers here, and you'll see how just brazen this is. 2, though, this is normal Republican playbooks, right? And I'm not somebody who's some turbo stand for the Democratic Party. But if there's one problem I think the Democratic Party has, it's that the rules of politics changed probably about 10 years ago. And they didn't change with it, right? And so now they're finally starting to get the message that this is how you do things in the United States. It's a bit more of a knife fight than it used to be. So here's the numbers, right? Because this is really significant, right? In the state of Texas, let's see if I can find you the exact numbers, right? In the state of Texas, in the 2024 election, right? Let me give you guys the numbers here. So Texas, this is, by the way, one of the largest Republican victories in every state, but the percentage of population was about 56 to 42, right? So again, we'll say 55 to 45 for just the sake of rounding. So a 55-45 split. However, because the state of Texas, right, these are the counties. These are not the districts, right? Let me see if we can find the current electoral districts in Texas, right? Congressional districts, right? Here we go. Here's the congressional districts map of Texas currently. Now, as you can see, there's all of these colors represent the different congressional districts. And zoom in on some of these maps. You can see in urban areas where Democratic voters are concentrated, you can see that they've created these incredibly bizarre sort of structures. And what these do is serve the Texas legislature to ensure that some districts act as holes. They're sinks where Democratic voters get piled into, right? Because whether you win a congressional district by one single vote or by 100 million votes or 700,000 votes, you still put one member of the party into Congress. And so what the state of Texas did is create some of these districts that are sinks for almost entirely Democrats, and then spread the remaining Democratic areas among a bunch of other districts, right? So, from where I live right now, this is not the future plan, the current plan. I am hundreds of miles away from the other people in my district, right? Because I'm in one of those kind of edge cases. And this is pretty preposterous, right? But what has this resulted in? Well, let's see if I can find it. Congressional representation. So right now, the Texas legislature has 38 members, and 25 of them are Republicans with 12 Democrats, right? So bear in mind, this is the enemy of almost anyone. This is the enemy of anyone, every scammer, every shitbag, every liar. It's a calculator app. You'd be surprised how much bullshit you can cut through with the magic of a calculator. Okay. So you have 38 congressional districts. Now let's say Texas was committed to fairness. They said, listen, 45% of you guys vote, or we'll say 54% of Texans supported the Republican Party. How many seats in Congress do you think they should get? Well, of those 38, there should be about 20. In reality, remember, today there's 25. But under the new redistricting plan that the Texas legislature is rolling out, that number is going to rise to 30. That's right, 30 out of 38. So 78% of the seats will go to Republicans, right? So again, a state where 54% of the voters are Republicans are going to send 78% Republicans to Congress. Does that feel like representative government to you? And it makes sense that, again, Texas Democrats, who are routinely willing to work with their Republican counterparts on sort of issues, say, listen, you can't gut us as a party. We're not going to just sit here and let this happen. But you might say, listen, following the rules is important. You can't just use loopholes in the law to exploit them to avoid the legislative process, right? You say, listen, Republicans are the majority in your state. And once you're the majority, you have a right to enact laws in Congress. If you can collect a majority, you can pass a law. That's how Congress should work, right? Not according to Speaker Mike Johnson as of 2 weeks ago. You might recall there was a little issue congressional Republicans ran into called Jeffrey Epstein, right? So you might recall, for example, that almost every Republican voted to keep the Epstein files hidden, despite the fact that their release, according to literally the president, would demonstrate that he totally didn't know Jeffrey Epstein, definitely didn't do anything. Also, though, his name is in the list, and it was put there by Bill Clinton, who also put his own name in the list, right? Okay, let's just drop the facade here. There is huge amounts of evidence that the president was an associate of Jeffrey Epstein's and expressed repeatedly that he had a strong attraction and preference to young girls. So let's just lay these things out there. And these files would almost certainly confirm that. So in order to protect the president from, again, whatever's in these files, House Johnson, or the House Speaker, as well as the overwhelming majority of Republicans, the House Speaker said, instead of simply calling a vote on the Epstein files, because remember, there are crucially just a few defectors that have said, actually, guys, I think Thomas Massie, Marjorie Taylor Greene, a few other Republicans who've said, listen, my constituents elected me to get to the truth of the Epstein files. And they say, listen, I know I'm not in them, so I don't have anything to worry about. So let's put them out here. Let's just put all our cards on the table. Democrat, Republican, Steve Bannon, Alan Dershowitz, Bill Clinton, Larry Summers, everybody. Just lay it out there. Just lay it out, because the public needs to know if you can be rich enough to buy the right to, be a pedophile, right? So House Speaker Johnson, instead of having to actually have this vote, lose the vote, and have a law that says that, you've got to release the Epstein files, he took advantage of his right to send lawmakers home and ordered them to leave. So again, when the Texas Democrats leave, it's unbelievably, unprecedentedly bad. But when House Republicans in Congress leave to avoid voting on Jeffrey Epstein and his files, well, suddenly it's hunky-dory. But remember, when the Democrats had a majority, the Republicans also were willing to use loopholes and all kinds of schemes to block legislation that was supported by a majority of Congress, like, for example, a voting rights bill that would have prevented states from, say, closing polling places in Democrat majority regions, but they sort of frame it as predominantly Black or Hispanic polling areas, right? And if you've ever voted, again, in a heavily gerrymandered district, I can tell you that in most elections, if you don't vote early, there are so few polling places that you typically wait 1 to 2 hours. And oftentimes these are in places where it's in the Texas heat. It's extremely hot. Like these are not accidents. In a lot of places, actually, their polling areas are segregated by party. So Republicans will fly through the polls, and Democrats will have to wait for sometimes hours. It doesn't feel very democratic, and this feels extreme only if you don't live in Texas and you haven't had to deal with this constantly. What feels like kind of a brazen attack on your democracy. Again, the Republicans also, of course, used what's called the filibuster rule. And by the way, this is the sort of the loophole they exploit to stop Democrat majority in the previous administration from implementing any one of their priorities. And the rule here is that technically, right, in the Senate, you can filibuster. You can talk and talk and talk and talk and freeze a process. And historically, that has been seen as a last-ditch effort by individual senators to oppose something they strongly believe in. And then after a while, it sort of became this thing where sometimes it'd be 3 or 4 senators who would agree to say, listen, we're going to talk in shifts and we're going to try to delay this bill as long as possible. But it was just that. It's a delaying tactic. But what happened is that there was this sort of change to how the filibuster thing happened in the Senate. The Senate was like, listen, we're all 800 gajillion years old. Most of us can barely talk. Half of us have dementia. So instead of making us actually filibuster, we're just going to say, I'm filibustering right now, right? So you're fucking Chuck Schumer, whoever, or Mitch McConnell, right? And you're like, I'm filibustering now. I can't talk so good, but I'm still on the floor. Just everyone pretend I'm filibustering. And so the rule is that the only way to break a filibuster is with 60 votes. And so that means that we in effect have changed the rules to say, actually, guys, if you get a majority of senators to support something, it doesn't matter. You need 60 senators to pass a new law in Congress, which is something, again, only by using this filibuster loophole and exploiting it in a way it was never intended to be exploited, are the Republicans able to stall legislation from going through. So again, it drove Biden crazy. Literally, it literally seemed to melt his brain because he describes it as absolutely insufferable. And that was in interviews when he was more coherent. Right? He literally said, quote, the threat to our democracy is so great, we must find a way to pass these voting rights bills. He said, debate them, vote, let the majority prevail. And if the bare minimum is blocked, we have no other option but to change the Senate rules, including getting rid of the filibuster. So... And he said, quote, I'm tired of being quiet. So again, this is a example, the right-wing media sphere is engaging in a level of hypocrisy that's like pretty annoying because again, Democrats just are so committed to being completely limp-wristed as a party. That's why no one respects them, right? Like America likes winners and winners play to win, right? It's like, imagine if a football team was like, well, guys, I just think it's sort of unfair that if I kick a field goal, I get 3 points. That doesn't seem right. So we're just not going to kick field goals. You'd be like, what are you talking about, dude? Play to win. These are the rules of football. Kick your field goals. Get your points. Teams win with it. Just do it. Like imagine, how long would you support a football team that goes, the field goal doesn't seem very fair, guys. I just think it should be worth like at most 2 points, not 3. That's unfair. How come it's only 1 point when it's after a touchdown? So you see how this is just again finally some Democrats tracks that it's Texas Democrats, who are built a little different, I will say, are finally engaging in this kind of real throwing real punches, right? It's not a wrestling match. It's not shadow boxing. And, you know, I wish like sometimes in American history, there have been moments where like there was a consensus where everybody kind of agreed to play by a certain set of rules. And then what happens is sometimes there were issues that were so significant, so partisan cracking, right? Fundamentally different visions of the country that the rules and consensus kind of broke apart, right? Look at the civil rights era. Look at slavery. Look at, you know, the populist, the Theodore Roosevelt trust busting era, right? These are like cleaving the country. The FDR Great Depression, really big reshuffles of what it means to be in these parties and how politics is done. And the fact is that, you know, I don't want to applaud it, but what gave the country the tools to come back together after these times is that it wasn't unilateral, right? Imagine if one party was the only one willing to play hardball and the other party was soft and committed acquiescence and never really rallied in any kind of meaningful way to subvert, to fight back, right? To play by the rules play by the new set of rules that were foisted upon them.